I have two buses here that have identical EQ on them. This is the way I do parallel compression on drums. I could do this all on this channel because I have a mix knob here. I could set my compression here and I could blend in my parallel compression sound. I just typically don't like to do that because, well, for two reasons. I don't know absolutely that I'll end up using this compressor, and I like to be able to separately automate the amount of parallel compression in here, and I just like having it on a fader as opposed to having to go to plugin and do the automation here. Another little fun fact that somebody else may not agree with me, I don't like the way the mix knob sounds on the distressor. I don't think it sounds as good as just having this thing all the way wet and blending it in the way that I have it set up here. So just to kind of explain to you why I'm doing that, and that if you have a compressor that has a mix knob on it that you like the way it sounds, you can do it all on one channel and you don't need this secondary dry channel. But I have a wet channel and a dry channel. Now, we need to assign all of the drums to go through that path, and they are on the drum bus. I want to keep this fader at 0 so it's nice for automation. So this output level here becomes my wet mix. Before we get into doing some of these other possible parallel paths, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just momentarily shut off my wet channel. I'm going to make some EQ moves, and then I will copy this EQ over to the wet channel, and then I'll turn the wet channel back on. I'm going to carve out some of the boxy mid-range. I'm going to give the drums a little bit of low-end boost. I'm going to open the top end up and just do general EQ to the drum group instead of kind of going through and doing a lot of individual stuff. I still am going to go do individual EQ moves on the drums, but I will have to do less, and it'll be more about managing the mid-range and getting them to fit together a little bit tighter. I'm going back and forth between 50 and 100 hertz, listening to which is going to be a better overall EQ bump for the drums. The kick drum and the drums have a nice low punchy sound to them already, and when I have it on 50, feels like it's getting too much down into the way the bass has been recorded. It sounds like the intention of this record was for the bass to be the thing that sits underneath. Sometimes it's the other way around, where the kick drum is the lowest thing and carries the weight, and the bass kind of sits above it. But it seems like that the way that this has been recorded and the intention, it sounds better if I make the low end focus of the kick drum and the drums sit just above the bass. So I'm choosing 100 hertz. I've put it in a bell curve. So we're going to open up the top. I like 15 because 10 seems to get too much down into where I hear the snare drum starting to be overly affected, and that mid-range that I'm going to want to try to clean up and address, it starts to be too present. The 15 sort of opens up the articulation of the snare and the overheads, so I like that. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of clean up the mid-range. .690 seems the best to me. I don't really feel like I need to use this band right now. Actually, I should check and see how tight of a Q I want to use in that 600 spot. A wider bell seems nice. Okay, so now I'm going to copy this EQ over here because I want the same exact EQ on both paths. Now we're going to add the wet sound in. I want a more aggressive setting. I like to use the distressor on drums, and I'm going to put it in the nuke. For the detector circuit, do I want to use the high pass? Do I want to use upper mid-range accentuation? And you will also see me throw in the link, which it's asking it to be linked to another distressor. And because I'm not setting up a link or a sidechain, it changes the distortion characteristic of the way that the unit responds to input. So it's like it's a sound choice. You see the difference in the way that the compressor responds to the snare drum and different things, and it also, the sonic signature changes a little bit. I feel like there's better control without the link in. It's a choice. Sometimes I make it. I like both of these engaged, where the high pass means that it's not responding as much to the low end and letting that be more dynamic. It's got a fairly slow attack, which means it's letting a lot of the transients through. It's being very aggressive. We're getting a lot of gain reduction. So it's bringing up the room ambience quite a bit. If I have a slow release, it's sustaining the compression for longer. And so even though it's bringing up part of the room tone, it's also sort of flattening out the tails of things. I'm kind of trying to get the sound to jump a little bit more. Something that releases fairly quickly is a nice thing because it's clamping down on the tail end of the transients. It's letting the bright, very initial articulate things come through. It's sitting on some of the post-transient energy, and then I'm kind of making the room sound jump up a little bit, but I'm not making the compressor release too slow to sustain to where it's holding the compression for too long, and then the room sound is kind of too flat. I kind of want it to pump and be exciting. And then I'm blending that in. The wet to dry ratio in general for parallel compression on drums is kind of a 60-40 relationship. I'm kind of pushing that a little bit more. I'm getting it closer to 50-50. I don't really feel like I need any of these distortion harmonic additions. This is the audio, and I certainly don't want to high pass my low frequencies. So call out your light bulb.